talk to me about advancing your career, specifically whether it's a preconception that's correct or not about managing people, and whether that's an obligation, whether you have to go through in your career people management at some point to be able to, I guess, say that you've progressed and advanced your career. What do you think?
I think there are quite a few different facets to it. I think, in short, I don't think management's a necessity to progress. I think it's quite an archaic view on how to move forward.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of corporate structures, management of people is a next step.
Yeah, I think it's, to me, years gone by, you'd see it as you're managing people, you've stepped up, you've got more money, you've stepped up, and maybe your job title's changed. They're probably the three things that come to mind. Do you think that, pretty much a loaded question, do you think it's a change for the better then? The fact that you've referenced it in the past rather than it being something right now?
100%. I think the people that are doing it right in terms of employers are the people that are empowering people to be successful without management being a requirement.
Yeah.
I think what's happened is companies have lost huge amounts of talent because there are people that don't feel comfortable or aren't suited to management, yet it's the only way within a certain corporate structure that they can progress. If they then were in a position where they speak out and say, I don't feel like I'm right for management, that's a negative.
Yeah.
So the way that I view it and the way that I'm looking at it at the moment is, if you want to absolutely, and this is quite specific to Flaunt and digital and service-based, but if you want to absolutely nail your craft, smash it, be the master, that's really valuable.
Yeah.
That means that your progression plan is you're going to become a master of everything within your field, within your craft. That then needs to be supported by the business in a way which gives that person the elevation and the seniority to do that and be seen within their own right as a senior body or a senior person within that specific sector. I also think that there's another way to look at it, in that, let's say you agree or you work with somebody and that's the path they want to walk. They don't want to manage. They hate it, but they're amazing. That doesn't then mean that when they're senior within their field, they can't mentor and pass knowledge along.
Yeah.
There's a difference between being a mentor and being a manager.
What's your understanding then of that difference? How can that play out in reality, the differences between those? Because just before we came on here, I've just literally been reading this article, How to Advance in Your Career Without Becoming a Manager. And exactly, there's little tips in there about you as the person wanting to drive and advance your career, what you should do. Interestingly, the first one is about being proactive around seeking non-management roles. That's kind of a given because they probably exist more and more as we've talked about than they probably did a few years ago. But become a specialist. Exactly what you were just saying about nailing your craft and almost just having that as your driving force around advancement, and then seek out a mentor and learning from that mentor, understanding that there is a difference between being a mentor or being mentored and managing somebody. So I've just read what they've put in that article as around the mentorship, but what's your understanding in practice as to what the difference is between the two, manager and mentor?
I think a manager of one person, 2 people, 10 people, there are things that come with it that fall into, you have to sort of walk a line with considerations for HR, you have to look after people's progression plans, you have to have a view of how people are delivering work, what they're delivering, what they potentially could improve on. Whereas I think just mentoring someone on a skill or a craft is you using your experience to help them progress and help them do things how you know things should be done. All the peripheral things that comes with management fall away. So someone that has the passion, the skills, that's the best at what they do in your organization, passing that passion, that knowledge, that expertise down to somebody, why would you not want to keep that in your business just because someone doesn't want to manage people?
Yeah, I guess you've probably answered that by showing that there is enough of identifiable differences between being a mentor, being a manager. But do you think manager is a label that's 100%. Thrown around too much and has changed probably now for the good, I would think, but it still remains as a target, I think. But I don't know whether it's more so if it's any more than just surface level and job title driven. Because as I said at the start of this, I would say years gone by, the 3 pillars of success against your career is an advancement in or more money, job title change, which is then potentially has manager in the job title, and then the other thing that we talked about. But that as manager in the job title, is there more to it than for some people? Is it just a shiny new object thing to chase? And that still exists with some people. And obviously, I think the point that's going to run through this is everyone's different anyway. So you can't box people in. And I think that's where I feel we're really good at Flaunt. And employment, generally speaking, has progressed to be more understanding and accepting that not everyone should be pushed into that box, into that corner. But is manager, is it a label? Is it just a job title-y thing?
I think you could probably apply that same question into all job titles, realistically. Generally, in industries, there is a hierarchy that is structured via job titles, because on the face of it, how else are you going to, if you have to go for an interview or apply for another job, how else are you supposed to communicate something that's so deep in such a short sort of sentence? It's hard to do, whereas having a logical, rough, worldwide scale for what is perceived as a progression path is how it's done. But I think what's happening is there's a shift now in people knowing their worth, being able to communicate it better, being able to feel confident in themselves and putting that across. I don't think it's a necessity to have that job title anymore.
No.
I think you can, like I say, be, and if you're at the right company, that company will support that path and that job title in line with how you think about it. And what I mean by that is market value.
Yeah.
So an employer that has almost like a blindness to people staying at one company forever, or not being considerate to people's market value, is not thinking about your progression selflessly.
Yeah.
They're thinking about it from their perspective.
Yeah.
Whereas, in my opinion, a modern business should be giving everybody the opportunity to have the tools and the training and the backing that they need to not only do their job well, but if ever they then come to want to move along, their market value is in line or above where they need to be to go and have that opportunity.
Do you think a big part of all of this, so figuring out, I think we've talked about being a mentor, being a manager, some people maybe listening to this won't have a clue for themselves. Do you think a big part of it is research for yourself as an employee, let's say, which direction you want to go in? Because I'm just thinking of me years gone by and saying we were having this conversation, or I was listening to this conversation. I don't know whether I'd know the differences. I know obviously that's why I asked you what the differences between manager and mentor are, but how do people know which direction they might want to go? Or I guess they might be sat behind a desk and working for somebody and they don't know what's on offer for them. Is it just about research? Is it self-awareness as well? Getting to know yourself as much as you can, which might dictate which direction you want to go in.
I think if you're coming into any role as a new thing, as an exec level or a graduate level or a junior, however you want to label it, I think those questions in part should be answered by you as you gather experience, but also I think the employer should be supporting those conversations. Right. You should have a line of communication from the person that you're working from, whether that be your line manager or senior leadership or the person that you sit next to. The communication should be there in a way which empowers people to follow the path that they know plays to their strengths.
Yeah.
I think a lot of businesses try and put a progression path in front of someone that they think is the right one. Yet it can't be that black and white, especially in a creative industry. Creatives are so broad in terms of where they can apply their mind in the best possible way. You can't do that. And what's happening is there's a digital skills shortage, talent shortage, certainly in our industry. Good people are hard to find and skilled good people are hard to find.
Yeah.
So when you bring people into the business, you must do everything you possibly can for that person for a multitude of reasons, to make sure that you're being a responsible employer, to make sure that you're getting the best out of them while they're here, to equip them to deliver market value for themselves. And all these things play into a modern way of driving a business forward, in my opinion.
Do you think an employer should take it upon themselves, if that's the right way of phrasing it? If you've got someone within your business that you think wants to go in a certain direction, and you just have a gut feeling or from experience think that kind of the self-awareness process hasn't been gone through and been completed to the degree where they may actually turn around and go in a completely different direction. So in other words, they say they want to be a mentor or they want to be a manager, and you identify from working with them, working alongside them, that maybe that's not quite right. Do you think it's kind of on our shoulders, on the employer's shoulders, to turn around and say, I actually think you might need to be pointed in this direction, i.e. the complete opposite direction to what they're thinking? Or do you think you stand back and let them work it out themselves? How do you think?
I think probably a mixture of both. Obviously, you carry a good level of understanding about the services that are being delivered by the people that work for you or for the business. So having a line of communication that person knows is coming back at them with nothing but care for their career is how it needs to be communicated. Sitting opposite someone that's saying to you, I feel like I want to go in this direction, and you having an understanding of their capabilities and offering them your view on it, is something that you would be doing them a disservice if you didn't communicate. What they choose to then do with that information that you give them is up to them. I've been in situations in Flaunt whereby people have applied for one role and we've recommended that they'd be better suited in another role, and that person's absolutely smashed that role. It's happened recently. Someone's been in the business for a couple of years and then they've pivoted into wanting to do something else, and I've gone, that makes absolutely fucking perfect sense. Go do that. Let's facilitate that. And we've then built around that, and we've moved things around to make that happen. You've got to do it.
I think the research thing, both being guided and having the opinions from experience of employers or colleagues, is definitely, you're right. It's that if you've got that thought in your mind or opinion, not sharing it is a disservice to that person. However, not putting it on them to feel like they've been backed into a corner and done a U-turn on their original thought, I guess, is the key, which I guess can be a fine line, but we're back to the same rhetoric. With the right people around the place, with the right culture, with an understanding that people can communicate and things should be on the table, cards should be on the table. This is a safe space to be able to say something. I think the right culture means that those conversations that are happening at whatever level they're happening at should mean that it's a two-way conversation, and any information that is shared in whichever direction doesn't have to U-turn the other person who's on the, let's say, receiving end of it. I think that's probably the fine balance, because I still think, back to what we said right at the start, those 2 or 3 points that I identified from years ago as being the marks of your career progressing, I still think we've got an issue there. I think you're right saying modern businesses are kind of turning it on its head or whatever. Absolutely right. But it still exists. I didn't read that article as number 1 on Google because, this isn't an issue and something to talk about. So I do think that the manager thing and the people management responsibility exists out there. It still exists as potentially something to strive towards, regardless of any of that self-awareness, whether you're right for it, want it or not.
Bringing it back to self-awareness, I think if you're in that point in your career, let's say where you're developing a passion for what you're doing, which is great, you found something that you feel like is where you want to live career-wise, but you don't yet feel like that the relationship is there for you to have that conversation with your employer, I would then take a step back and look at your circle of close friends, family, and use that circle that know you on a personal level to validate what you're thinking about your path moving forwards.
Yeah.
Speak to your best friends, speak to your mum and dad, speak to whoever you've got available that might be able to offer some insight into you on a personal level and whether you would be suited to what you're thinking about doing in terms of management specifically.
Yeah.
Because the concept of management requires certain things that aren't difficult to grasp regardless of what sector it sits in.
Yeah.
So pulling it back to that self-awareness, I think first steps wise, and if you don't have that comfort level, having that line of communication with your employer, then validate those thoughts with your close circle, your inner circle.
Yeah.
Have those conversations. And
I like that.
I think what will happen then is you've got an idea of, right, I don't know whether I want to manage and move down that route, but I feel like if I don't, I'm going to hold myself back. However, I feel like I'm better suited focusing on being the absolute monster in content.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those people will quite quickly, I think, validate that thought.
Yeah.
And you may get some people like your biggest fan, like your mum, might go, you can do anything.
Yeah.
That's not the kind of answer you need.
No, you want to go to your mate who laughs at you when you say, I'm thinking this. You go, no, not a chance. If you've got that kind of relationship, that's really good advice. And I think I've probably had it without knowing that I'm addressing it in that way. It's not like I've approached my brother, my dad, my friends, but I definitely will have had feedback in quite brutal ways, probably, having a beer with them, and I've said something and they've reacted to it, and actually it all embeds, it's all embedded in you take it in. But yeah, I think that's crucial advice, really. And let's not forget, a lot of people will be in that position where they don't quite feel like they have the tools or the confidence or the relationship to be able to approach your Monday to Friday employer. So have a beer with you, get your dad pissed and see what he says.
I think it's happening. I think you've just got to try and give yourself the freedom of thought to even consider your career in that way. And it's super hard when you first enter your career to think 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line, what am I going to be best doing?
That's why it's bullshit when you get asked questions. I mean, I haven't interviewed since me and you, and I wasn't even an interview or a chat, but me and my brother have had conversations about this, and this could be a whole new topic, but I know we've talked about recruitment and all that, but those questions that you get asked, where do you see based on your strengths and your weaknesses, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? I've got a LinkedIn post that I'm going to do at some point that looks back the 10 years or whatever when I first started, and I was getting asked those questions, and look where I am now. Would you have ever been able to have nailed it on? It's bullshit.
No, because life happens.
Exactly that. But yeah, I think great advice. Let's end on that. Speak to those closest to you and see if they'll laugh in your face.